Hey, Chris Duff over at Serious Land Capital, vacant land funding partner. Today, just wanted to comment on a few notes regarding commercial acreage for vacant lots. It's something that we do have experience in successfully flipped commercial lots. We get sent a number of them, but very rarely do they pass muster. So a few notes regarding them. First, in general, you just have to assume that days on market are going to be, on average, higher than residential or recreational vacant land lots. Pretty much every realtor is going to tell you that too. Yeah, there's just less commercial end buyers generally. Occasionally you might come across something, on a corner of, great highway frontage or, perfect setup for a franchise fast food joint or something like that. But that is quite a rare circumstance. And even if you do find one of those, due diligence timelines and kind of solidifying the actual close date and procedure of getting all those ducks in order is generally still going to be longer anyway, just because you have more decision makers that are going to be involved in that process, especially if you're working with possible franchise of larger companies that might have brick and mortar commercial establishments there. So that's just something to keep in mind anyway. And then comping out these properties are oftentimes a bit more difficult because commercial acreage is not as reliably marketed on the MLS compared to residential and recreational lots. So when you are reviewing the local market, checking Zillow, Redfin, what have you, in many areas, you're not necessarily going to come across commercial acreage. Sometimes it will be a little bit more common. Very, very rarely there will be circumstances where the commercial acreage is actually more common than residential. It depends on the specifics, but we have occasionally come across those circumstances before. So when you can locate some of those comps, you really want to double check, the actual type of zoning for the commercial too, because residential, the characteristics might be a little bit more, or at least the underlying zoning will probably be a little bit more similar, whereas commercial, you just have wider variance in terms of what might be able to be done on it. If you can do a full industrial warehouse versus being restricted to a small repair shop, and that's just to mention a previous property that we had done, which I'll do a case study on another time here, that can dramatically affect your end valuation as well as potential buyer pool. So, understanding what the true utility is for the underlying property is going to be necessary. And you have to keep that in mind. What are the more valuable types of zoning within the commercial umbrella in relation to comps that you are finding and how you might value the actual subject property. And I'm always cautious about, am I buying a lot that is right next to existing commercial to make that a lot easier? Or, is there some grandfathered in existing zoning from, 30, 40 plus years ago where the whole plans layout or the whole town or city's layout kind of changed over time, and some parcels that weren't developed upon just weren't rezoned in accordance to the actual true usage of the land surrounding it. So that can get complex as well, because even if you have the right zoning for a certain area, it's also possible that the FLU, the future land use, could be different, and the certain land that you're looking at is already designated for another usage. anyway, and sometimes that can be outdated. And I have another example property that we can go over another time, reviewing issues like that. But you can quickly see as I rattle off a few things here how complicated things can become pretty quickly. So yeah, really understanding things from the planning and zoning perspective, and just assessing that hyper local market, the street by street, who are the individual neighbors, are they next to resi buildings, are they next to commercial, etc., can make me feel a lot more confident versus not. Generally, I'm not going to be wanting to purchase commercial if I'm the first one on the street and completely surrounded by other residential properties. That's going to make a much tougher sell on average. But going back to the comps perspective, so it is tricky to figure out from the MLS in many markets what the true commercial comps are. So if you aren't able to find any, and you're only finding residential lots, like you can't really consider that to be particularly valuable from an acre. That'll probably tell you the bottom level pricing you might be able to get from your commercial acreage, because all things being equal, which is a tough thing to say for these particular properties, commercial acreage is going to be more expensive on a per acre basis compared to residential virtually everywhere. We'll find some examples that's not the case, especially if the residential is just on spectacular trophy type terrain. But other than that, commercial is just going to be more valuable, and oftentimes by a significant multiple on top of what nearby residential acreage or recreational might be. So that's also something to keep in mind. And if you can't find anything on the MLS, then I would check out LoopNet, and on other live reviews, I've pointed this out before. So that is a more reliable source for active commercial properties. As far as I'm aware, the UI is a little shaky. You're not able to look up sold properties. You're stuck looking at actives. You're already going to be limited in that regard. In regard to assessing comps, plus you're not able to get any insights into true activity. Like Zillow is so helpful for that with the views and saves. Nor do I believe you can see price decreases either. So it's kind of similar to land.com, where it's a bit of a black box in terms of what's actually been going on with the underlying listing. You can see when it was listed, and they're usually not even sorted by, when the property was listed. I've seen a number of commercial properties that might have been up for 6+ years, and just to throw a number out there. And, if I'm starting to see that, okay, that's already telling me, okay, the appetite might not be there, or it's just significantly overpriced, or there's certain characteristics that aren't going to be as attractive, or it's just a completely different type of commercial zoning than the underlying subject property you're looking at. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you're still not able to find any comps on Redfin Zillow side, and it's hard to assess, which it generally is, via LoopNet, what the underlying market might be, again, because you're really only going to be able to see actives. And oftentimes there's not that many in most areas, especially from a land perspective, or they might have existing improvements. You see that often on LoopNet, even though you're only supposed to be searching for land. I would call up one of those brokers attached to the LoopNet deal for probably the comp that's closest in terms of characteristics and sizing and location to the underlying subject property, and say, hey, I have a possible listing here. Like I found you on LoopNet. I see this property has been listed since whenever. Like, have you gotten any calls or site visits, possible lowball offers? Like, I don't know, maybe the seller is like only interested in their list price, and who knows what activities going on behind the scenes. But if you can really pin down where the market might be at, and just ask a lot of smart questions and see, okay, maybe there's an area or a way to work together and try to price the commercial lot to actually move a bit faster, that is generally going to be our go-to strategy when we're considering possibly funding a commercial lot. But they are not our favorites to do on average, just because usually the market is going to be pretty tricky and the opportunity cost is going to be significant in relation to just turning and burning more reliable resi or recreational lots, whether they're straight flips or minor subdivides. So that is just our general overview for commercial. We can get a lot more specifics ongoing. Again, if you have any funding leads, check out seriousland.capital or landpricer.ai for the simplest and most accurate way to value land parcels around the US, or Land Daily Diligence Facebook group for zero cost due diligence on your land, whether you want funding or not. And if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating or sharing this podcast if you found it valuable with somebody else, that would be extremely helpful for us as we grow. And if you can provide any feedback, what you like, what you don't, we have a couple weeks under our belt here. Excited to keep this going indefinitely here. Lastly, Dave Denison's on conference. Use my last name, DUFF, all lowercase, for $200 off your ticket for the event in August of this year. Hope to see you there. With that, take care.